It's ready whenever you are.
Yep, great. So welcome everybody back to the final day of week 4. I appreciate everyone being uh, uh, patient as we deal with child care and other COVID-related crises, and also getting and supporting users on Windows. So those of you who've been watching the forum know that it's been non-trivial getting some things to work on Windows, but I think that we have most of that covered, as I will say shortly. So for deploying to Amazon Web Services, there had already been some instructions online about purchasing a domain name like gameswithwords.org or whatever it is you want to use, and setting up a couple other things you need like a Docker Hub ID. Past that, there's really only the following to get a site up and running, which is running Pushkin AWS init. By the way, you will need the newest version of the CLI to do that. So you'll want to upgrade your CLI, which we did previously. So you can look back at those instructions, but can't write it here right now. But it's if you're using Yarn, it's Yarn upgrade -- global. Sorry, no, that's not it. That's npm. Anyway, you can ask on the forum if you need to, if you don't remember how to do that. But upgrade the CLI and run Pushkin AWS init. It'll take a long time. So it turns out there's a lot to install. And so you'll see it hanging for a while. It may take more than 10 minutes to complete. That's not unexpected. And then hopefully that's it. And then you will actually be able to go and navigate to your website and see it. Now it can be finicky if you say typed in the wrong domain name or something, or you forgot to set up Docker Hub or didn't follow one of the other instructions that come first, in which case you'll have to rerun. There are instructions on rerunning. A lot of times fixing whatever the issue was and then just rerunning will work. Sometimes you may need to actually just start over. Oh yeah, that's, I'll get back to monitor building in a second. If you need to start over, you'll want to delete not your local copy, but the copy in the cloud, the AWS deploy. And we wrote a command for that, Pushkin AWS Armageddon. You usually have to run this one twice. The reason for that is that there are many, many components to your online website. There is a cluster, a load balancer, a number of security groups, a couple databases, a S3 bucket, a CloudFront distribution, and probably other things I'm not thinking of. And some of them depend on other ones. So some you can't delete until the other ones have finished deleting. And rather than write, and we have some parts of AWS Armageddon that'll just wait, but it was easier for some of the things that take longer to delete for you to just run it twice. So you'll just wait a few minutes and try again. Alternatively, you can use the Amazon Web Services console, and you'll eventually want to learn how to use the Amazon Web Services console anyway to manage some of the things that just aren't written into the CLI, some customization that you may want to do. And we have instructions, it's in the advanced instructions under deployment on how to delete everything using the console. So after that, after you've gotten your website up and running, then, okay, sorry. Let me go back to the monitor billing part. All right, so the other thing to know, if you haven't used Amazon Web Services before, you pay essentially by the second and by the byte. So when data is transferred, you pay for that. When every second that a computer is running, you pay for that. And the numbers are very, very small, but they can add up over time. If you, for instance, start a Pushkin website today and then forget about it, eventually you'll get a bill for the rest of the month, which is part of why if you are just practicing, I recommend deleting your site when you are done practicing, so that you're not paying in the meantime if you're not using it in the meantime. Now, this, again, it doesn't necessarily add up to a lot. Right now, we have the initial deploy set up so that you're using essentially minimal resources. So very small computers, very small database. It's not necessarily what you would want to use for collecting data. You'll want to probably increase the size of some of those things, which is something that there's documentation in AWS how to do, and we'll be adding documentation in the Pushkin docs as well, and eventually have commands that'll help you do this from the from the CLI as well. And obviously, we're always on the forum to help you out. So in the meantime, it won't be, even if you did leave on your Pushkin site, it shouldn't be particularly expensive. We're talking $5, $10 over the course of a week, maybe. But it's good practice to turn off things that you aren't actually using. So after that, as I said, as I said at the very beginning, weeks ago now, what I see Pushkin is not a one-stop shop, because everybody who's listening to this has different research needs, and it is very hard to make anything that is one size fits all, because one size just doesn't fit all, and you're going to want to do different things potentially. So a lot of the work that we've done is in figuring out basically some defaults, deciding how to set up an Amazon Web Services site, which services you think you're likely to need, some basic default website structure. But these are things that you may want to tinker with. For deployment, Amazon Web Services has an enormous number of docs. I will admit, tell you that they're not especially easy to read. But if you end up wanting to do something really, really custom, you're going to eventually want to get familiar with AWS. And again, we're always, as I keep repeating, on the forum, happy to give you pointers. Speaking of Pushkin forum, continue coming back to that to ask questions, ask about how to make modifications or upgrade things. We are rapidly rolling out new features. So it's very helpful to know what it is that people need, or what would be useful, right? So for us to write a command that'll automate a bunch of things, we want to know that it's something that people actually need. So it's helpful to know what you're looking for. We have just started a new email list. This is a little bit different from the forum. It's not an email list that you can message to. It'll be read-only. It's on Google Groups, so you can sign up through Google Groups, which you're probably familiar with. If you're not, I guess, again, ask on the forum how to sign up. What we'll be using this for over time is basically sending out, very occasionally updates saying, by the way, we have these new features you might want to try out, or we just put up some new default experiments or some new experiment templates that you may be interested in, or tips and tricks, things that we think it makes sense for a lot of people to see. So I recommend signing up for that. Okay, so today, what are you actually going to have to do? It's not going to be as simple as just upgrading your CLI and typing Pushkin AWS init. And that is because to deal with largely secure changes in security, to make these websites a bit more secure, we did make a couple changes that we have documentation on how to do that. If you were starting a new site from scratch, you're not going to have to worry about that, because you'll just be using the newest versions of the templates. I should say for the basic experiment template and the grammaticality judgment template, those have been updated. We have not updated to the new version of the CLI, the other two templates, but that should happen really in the course of the next few minutes. So in the documentation, one thing that I want to draw your attention to is a new section of the quick start called Update Configs. This shows you what the config file looks like for Pushkin. And there's some information in there about things that you may want to change, right? If you want to change the name of your site from Citizen Science website, which is the default, to something specific, it's not going to change your URL, right? So your URL will be whatever you set that up as. But in terms of what shows up in the browser, there's some other places where, in the website, you write the name of your website. Right now, it's just going to say Citizen Science website, unless you update that. There's a few things there that it'll explain what you want to potentially update. Since this was added new, I'm just pointing it out now, since this is a section of Quick Start that all of you have already been through. The other thing, as I mentioned, is we do have some migration instructions. So this bolded part, bottom third of the screen there, how to ensure compatibility for Pushkin site template default 1.2.0 with Pushkin CLI 3.0.0. I don't think it's 3.0.0 because I think it's actually 2 point something. But anyway, the newer version of the CLI, as I said, there's a few things that you're going to need to go into and just like change some words in a few different pieces of code, a few different documents. It should be very straightforward, and obviously let us know if you're running into any problems. Most of the changes that are required for using an old version of the template with our newer CLI that handles Amazon Web Services, most of those changes are actually handled automatically. But there's a few things where it was just easier to ask you to go ahead and type it in rather than try to write more code to do that for you. Again, if you end up just using a new site and the new version of the default site template, it shouldn't be an issue. The one other thing that so this is again how to get information. One other thing that I want to mention is some of you have probably been waiting on an issue with those of you who are developing in Windows. So as you probably know, Windows in theory has a way, so Pushkin, like just about every other piece of sort of research software, is written for Unix. Now, in theory, you can run Unix programs on Windows, but the Windows Linux distribution has an error in it, has a bug in it that hasn't been fixed yet. And so we couldn't run, there's, I believe Docker was the thing you couldn't run, but there was something important that you couldn't run. So we provided instructions for setting up a AWS instance that you can use to run to develop your experiment if you're using Windows. The fact that you are using an instance rather than things running on your local computer raises some issues for Auth0, our authentication software that helps with security, and it makes it so that you can't do local testing. It should not actually, so Pushkin Start doesn't work. It should not actually cause a problem if you are deploying to AWS, but if you wanted to test things locally, which you should, you can't because of some security features. What we have done hopefully before too long, Windows will eventually fix the error that they have in Linux, and we will be able to develop in Windows just fine. In the meantime, I have distributed a new site template called Basic, so Pushkin Site Templates Basic, that has Auth0 completely disabled. So nobody's using Auth0 right now because the instructions aren't complete for that. So it's not part of the Quick Start, which is all what we're covering in this workshop. And so it's not really a problem to turn it off. So I just made a separate template that has it completely turned off. And that should, as far as we can tell from our testing, eliminate those problems. But we have a couple last tests to do to make sure it runs on multiple different computers. So I can't say for sure yet, but probably in the next few minutes, we will know for sure and fix any remaining problems that there are. So that is it for today in terms of the live presentation. Until 4 o'clock Eastern, we will be answering questions on the forum. And that's it. Look forward to talking to you. And oh yeah, probably next week, but I'm not sure. But we are going to have our final wrap-up meeting that was week 5, which is an Ask Me Anything day, in which you can ask me and Josh DeLeu and Becky Gilbert questions that you may have about online experiments. The exact schedule for that is still TBD, because of course the semester is starting again, and that changes things up in terms of when people exactly are available. Okay, see you on the forum.